For this conversation, we're starting from the premise that not only is Bitcoin digital gold, but it actually has the ability to be so much more than that. And we're going to be hearing from 5 great panelists, developers, entrepreneurs, engineers, as to some of the really exciting developments that are happening in this space. So on that, I'd like everyone to just very briefly introduce themselves.
Hey, my name is Rodarmor. I created Ordinals and inscriptions and runes, and I think I'm just here for comic relief.
Everyone, I'm Muneeb. I'm the founder of Stacks, which is a Bitcoin layer. You can try to transfer your BTC in there, and it becomes more programmable or cheaper or faster to move it around inside the layer instead of doing it on the Bitcoin L1.
Good morning, everyone. Nicolas, I'm VP of Product at Lightspark. Lightspark is a Lightning Bitcoin business helping money move more natively on the internet, leveraging Bitcoin and Lightning behind the scene. I've been a Bitcoin builder for some time. Excited to be here today.
Nick Carter, a general partner at Castle Island Ventures. We invest all across the crypto space and in Bitcoin businesses.
Jeff Garzik, former Bitcoin core developer, now entrepreneur and builder, co-founder of the Hemi network, which is a next generation L2 that combines the king and queen of crypto, Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Excellent. Fabulous. So let's start with a little bit of scene setting and look at Bitcoin's journey as how it's evolved from being digital gold to where it is now. And maybe, Nicolas, we start with you on that one.
Yeah. I think the Bitcoin journey we all witnessed from being this digital representation of gold to a more kind of multifaceted role that Bitcoin is playing today in technology really reflect the transformative impact that Bitcoin and its network can have on technology, on finance, and more broadly, frankly, on society here in the US and around the globe. I think it's fair that early on, we all thought of Bitcoin as the decentralized aspects of the technology and the assets, the scarcity effect of Bitcoin. But I think we moved on from that with institutional adoption of Bitcoin, with better regulatory clarity. And a lot of you in this room are driving that. And to be fair, real applications that we're all building on to bring and leverage Bitcoin to its full potential. I know we're going to touch on some of that, but at Lightspark, for example, we're working on the layer 2 aspect behind Bitcoin to address some of the limitation of that technology. We're working also on abstracting Bitcoin complexity for some financial institutions to be able to leverage Bitcoin to its full potential. So I think that evolution of technology, of protocols, and institutional and regulatory clarity, I think helped making what Bitcoin is today and will become in the future.
And you bring up the interesting point, the original premise, it was all really about the scarcity. And I know many of you have been in this space for a long time. I think, Jeff, you mentioned, when did you start?
I'm very old in Bitcoin years. Started in 2010 with Jed McCaleb and the great slash dotting, the first influx of Bitcoin developers.
And so what's your view on this? Seeing Bitcoin's evolution, do you think, does it sort of hobble away from its original premise, or does it actually ensure its longevity, this evolution?
I'd like to think that Bitcoin is the strongest, most secure blockchain on the planet. It's the most bomb-proof. It's the least likely to go away of any coin, any token, any blockchain network. And that kind of forms the security root of the rest of the crypto ecosystem, in my opinion. And I think that security is of great value for not only BTC, the coin, the token, but also people building on Bitcoin. And so it's kind of a multi-layered answer of there hasn't been a lot of evolution, and this is maybe a bit controversial, but I think that's good for Bitcoin in that it remains highly secure, highly bomb-proof, and anyone who wants to build on Bitcoin has that layer of confidence that it's just going to work and I can focus on my own product.
And we actually heard, I'd like to sort of now focus the conversation on actually some of the exciting developments that are being made in the space. And on one of the panels yesterday, David from Wave Digital, he made the comment, we don't need thousands of layer ones. What we really need are thousands of applications that actually have use cases. So I'd like you to tell me a bit about how this applies to Bitcoin and some of the innovations you're seeing in the space, and maybe we turn to Muneeb for that.
Yeah, so I think the way to think about this is that Bitcoin is very simple and secure, but the flip side of that is that it's also sort of like less programmable by design at the layer one. And I think that is one of the reasons why I've seen, Vitalik try Ethereum, and, people have started other projects where mostly they're trying to have a more expressive virtual machine or a better programming environment. And we've seen that, developers come in and they try to build all sorts of applications here. But there is a way, I think Casey's work shows this, that there is a way to build these things directly either on the Bitcoin L1, like Ordinals are basically NFTs that we've seen, how much interest they saw, or Runes protocol is sort of like you can have different types of token standards. You can issue stable coins on Bitcoin L1 directly using these things. It's possible to do it on the L1, but there will be some scalability limitations or expressivity limitations. And that's where I think the layer twos come in. And that's like putting definitions aside, because different people have different definitions for these terms. But we are seeing this in Ethereum itself, that most of the usage or developer activity is now on L2s instead of being on L1. So if that's where some of these ecosystems are going, which are in some ways more mature, then why wouldn't that happen in Bitcoin? That is the largest capital base. It is the most secure chain. And you can have all these different types of layers on top as well, while having this activity on the L1. And I think that's the exciting part. This industry, I think, for some years, sort of like ignored Bitcoin from a building on Bitcoin perspective. But in the last sort of like year and a half or so, like that, it's been a massive movement back to.
And I really want to dive a bit deeper later on to the stablecoin discussion, because I think there's a whole nother discussion to be had around that. But I'd like to hear from your side, Casey. What sort of things are you building?
Not much. I'm pretty checked out from Ordinals and Runes development.
Tell me what it was originally.
Ordinals and Runes are just ways of doing tokens, various kinds of tokens on top of Bitcoin. So inscriptions are basically NFTs. Runes are fungible tokens. And I think I probably have a much more pessimistic viewpoint about the future applications of blockchain technology, which includes Bitcoin. All the stuff that I've built have basically been in service of creating this like weird casino for degenerates. And if you look at the vast majority of projects and applications out there, they're all just sort of repackaged degeneracy, right? If you look at, what is DeFi? DeFi is like weird, unregulated gambling. So I'm actually a bit pessimistic that we're going to put lettuce on the blockchain. I kind of think that Bitcoin as digital gold is almost enough, although I do sort of look forward to be proven wrong. And stablecoins I do think are interesting. We do see a lot of adoption of stablecoins as a non-gambling use case. Now, the tricky thing about stablecoins is that they don't necessarily benefit from a lot of what Bitcoin brings to the table, right? Bitcoin is secure, it's decentralized, et cetera. And stablecoins, people, the most popular stablecoins are essentially these like digital IOUs, right, from a central issuer. And people wind up using just the fastest, cheapest, least secure network possible, which commonly is like Tron, is Tether on Tron, is how people use stablecoins. So I would certainly like to see that activity come to Bitcoin, and it could come to Bitcoin. There's a lot of different token protocols on top of Bitcoin. Runes is just one of them that are perfectly appropriate for building stablecoins on Bitcoin. But it's a question of like, does it actually have product market fit? Can you deliver an experience on Bitcoin which delivers something that users cannot get on other chains, which I think remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. And Nick, maybe we can bring in the investor's viewpoint as well. How are you looking at the space, and how do you identify which are the degenerates, which are the real utility cases?
Yeah, look, we've been investing in Bitcoin startups since the very beginning of Castle Island 7 years ago. And initially there wasn't much to do, frankly, in terms of investing in Bitcoin. It was custody, exchange, and brokerage. And that was it. In the last year or so, I think, 2 years really, thanks largely to Casey's efforts, we've had a Bitcoin renaissance. And there has been a cultural shift within the Bitcoin space and an acknowledgement that maybe it is possible to build more expressive applications on Bitcoin. NFTs are now possible on Bitcoin. What I would hope to see would be a convergence between Bitcoin and other blockchains. I know that's sort of heresy in hardcore Bitcoin land, but I'm very excited about notions of, say, restaking, whereby you can benefit other chains. They can inherit Bitcoin security, from the proof of work, which is unparalleled levels of security, and other, let's say, proof of stake blockchains can benefit from that. And so, maybe the transactions aren't settling on Bitcoin per se, but, they're settling on some other blockchain, and Bitcoin is still incredibly important in, that settlement and the assurances you get from that. That is a really interesting development I'm tracking. And then the other thing is, of course, meaningful Bitcoin L2s that actually work with Bitcoin script. Maybe BitVM, the new version of BitVM just came out recently. Maybe that will be the technology that takes us there. I'm very hopeful that we get real, roll-ups on Bitcoin, whether optimistic or ZK. I think we will see those in mainnet, at the end of this year. And so from an investor perspective, I've actually never seen more abundant opportunities on Bitcoin than I have in the last 7-8 years. So it's actually a very exciting time for us.
And I guess one of those big use cases, and we were discussing this earlier, is the payment space. And I know many of you have experience in that. How, and Nicolas, I'd like to direct this question to you. How have Bitcoin's scalability issues been addressed or being addressed to facilitate more transactions?
Yeah, as we mentioned, L2s on top of Bitcoin, addressing the lack of scalability and velocity and the cost associated with L1 transactions. That's where L2's network like Lightning, we have a big bet on Lightning at Lightspark, comes in. And we see some good adoption from large financial institutions that were scared clearly about Bitcoin and entering this space previously, but now seeing real adoption of Bitcoin and Lightning because for cross-border money movement, for example, because that complexity has been abstracted because of the regulatory clarity, and start seeing that the user adoptions has been facilitated with new protocol or new ways. We launched these UMA addresses, for example, these universal money address that makes it very easy for anyone to adopt a human readable address. Don't need to remember complex wallets, keys, or scan a QR code, or making that user experience frictionless is one of the limitation to Bitcoin traditionally in money movement. So UMA is one of those protocols that we start seeing some good adoption. The L1 fees as well, justify moving to an L2 type model. And at Lightspark, we're working with the likes of Coinbase and Nubanks and others, like big credible financial institution exchanges that see value in leveraging this network and the benefit of L2s as cross-border money movement.
And can you give a use case example of that that's already been in effect?
Yeah, just to pick one, that's I'm sure we're quite familiar, it's been discussed quite some time, but we start seeing the real adoption and mainstream adoption now because of the reason we're all working on and mentioned, which is, I'm a US-based user and I want to send money to either countries in LATAM or in Europe. We know there is a lack of interoperability. I might use, let's say, Venmo or whatever wallets in the US. I want to send USD. I want to make that very simple, sending to a phone number or sending to a simple name or email address to someone that wants to receive a different currency in Europe, euro, maybe into a different wallet, and I want to do that instantly for the money to arrive safely and, with limited fees involved. That's one of the use cases that we have developed with our partners, where I can easily go to my local app in the US, initiate payments, from USD currency. What we do at Lightspark is helping behind the scene converting USD into Bitcoin, just to, using Bitcoin and layer 2 as a settlement layer, open 24/7, doesn't close at 5 p.m. on a Friday, so you can move money, 7 days a week. and then, it get converted back into euros, on the receiving side. So a pretty simple use case that's been discussed for some time, in the Bitcoin world, but now we're seeing, a lot of adoption.
And I'd like to come back to sort of related to the payment space and how Bitcoin intersects, overlaps, or can work with stablecoins. It seems fitting. We're obviously in the state of Wyoming, the first state to issue its own stablecoin. Bitcoin and stablecoins, how do they interact? How can they interact? How do you see them interacting in future? Maybe Nick, we go to you on this one.
I'll start out by saying that I think the crypto industry writ large is always looking for killer apps. The first killer app that's definitely here is Bitcoin. Bitcoin the token, Bitcoin the network. That's a success. That's not going away. The second killer app, which is probable, is stablecoins in general. There's a lot of, well, back up a second. One of the things I like to do macroeconomically, you look at what is the cost of digital asset creation? It's zero, which means we'll be flooded with tokens. What is the cost of digital network creation? Zero, so we're flooded with networks. But you have to push all that innovation, experimentation, et cetera, through the crucible of the internet, the real world, Darwin's trial by fire. And just like venture capital, power law says that 95% of those will fail, but 2, 3, 4, 5% are going to be an amazing longevity success. And that's just the pattern that repeats inside and outside of crypto. Where stablecoins come in with regards to Bitcoin, the first, which has been in play for a while, is just collateralizing, such that people lock up their Bitcoin, they mint stablecoin based on that, and as Bitcoin rises and falls in price, they either have to put up more collateral or pay back some of the stablecoin. But fundamentally, that let hodlers and Bitcoin maxis start to keep your Bitcoin and do something else with it. And that was, again, that first start, that's not new. That's been going on for years. And we see the restaking and LRT, LST trends today are building on that with liquid restaking tokens. And it does get to a little bit point of leverage ridiculousness where it's restaked. But the stable coins are the second killer app. That's what people are looking for. Is I can't, as a medium of exchange, very easily use Bitcoin as much as I would like to. I was lamenting in the green room the death of BlockFi because they had this really cool credit card where you keep your Bitcoin as Bitcoin, but I can swipe at any Visa or MasterCard merchant and I purchase my coffee or whatever, and it debits in Bitcoin. So that was a very real world use case of, the medium of exchange, medium of interchange that interplays into the whole stablecoin aspect. There's a lot more to stablecoins. We could talk about that the whole panel, but I'll pop it over.
Just a quick question before we talk. If people were able to pay for things on a credit card using Bitcoin, how many people here would actually use it as a medium of exchange? Okay, so we have just a few. A follow-up question on the stablecoins using Bitcoin as collateral. Isn't Bitcoin still too volatile to be used in that manner, or? No,
people do that all the time. There are a lot of DeFi gadgetry. MakerDAO is one example where you deposit wrapped to Bitcoin that gives you a certain amount of credit, and that credit is over collateralized such that if Bitcoin goes down a little bit, you're still safe. And you can dial your own risk as to, I have $1 million of Bitcoin and I'll mint $500,000 worth of US dollar peg stable coins. I'm pretty okay for most of that volatility. And so it's these products exist. You can dial your risk. You can go way degen or you can go super safe where you don't have to worry about it.
And Muneeb, I'd like your views on stablecoins as well. What are you seeing in the space? And
I feel like we have a stablecoin expert sitting here, Nick.
Right.
I'll yield to him first.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I'll go a little further than Jeff and say, I by the numbers, I think stablecoins are more widely used transactionally than Bitcoin actually today. If you add up all of the transactions that happen on blockchains, about 60% from a value perspective are stablecoins. Bitcoin's about 20%, then there's 20% everything else. There's $160 billion worth of stablecoins out there. There's over 100 million addresses on blockchains that have a non-zero stablecoin balance. It's around 20 million monthly actives across all the blockchains that are using stablecoins. And stablecoins settle around $6 to $10 trillion worth of value every year. So they're a very meaningful application, probably the most important in crypto. Look, I started with Bitcoin, but I acknowledge the importance of stablecoins. I do think the over-collateralized model of issuing stablecoins against Bitcoin is a good one, and will certainly continue. There's the synthetic stablecoin model where you have a Bitcoin long position and an offsetting short position. Athena is an example of a project that does that. That will be successful, I believe. And then there's the very simple notion of fully fiat-backed stablecoins that are, circulating as tokens on the Bitcoin network. And, the tragedy is that this is where stablecoins began on Bitcoin, on the Omni network. That's where Tether began. And more recently, Tether deprecated its Bitcoin transactional protocol. They don't issue on Omni anymore. And it's mostly on Tron and Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain and the Ethereum L2s. And I think the existence of stablecoins on a blockchain creates fee pressure, which is good for the blockchain. It creates vibrancy. It's the collateral and the substrate that people use to transact with. It's an enormously good thing. And so the challenge for the Bitcoin community is, are we going to reintroduce stablecoins to Bitcoin? I think it would be tremendously good if we were able to do that. So perhaps it'll be on Lightning. Perhaps it'll be on rollups on these newer L2s. Maybe it'll be on the base layer.
All of the above.
Hopefully all the above. But I think we are at a crossroads because the user numbers are telling us stablecoins are something that people want and they are being integrated into traditional payments rails. Where's Bitcoin in that conversation? Or are we being left behind? So that's what I want to see change.
And why is that, and how can we change that?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about this is a lot of people believe in Bitcoin that it's the most secure decentralized network and the asset. But if you look at how Bitcoin is being used, let's say I just want to buy Bitcoin or I want to trade against a stable, I'll have to go to a centralized exchange. I'll be on Binance, I'll be on Coinbase, somewhere else. You look at Ethereum I can trade in a decentralized way because there's Uniswap running on Ethereum that has deep liquidity. So the most decentralized asset, BTC, is actually going into the hands of a lot of centralized parties. Even the example that Jeff is talking about, where let's say I'm a Bitcoiner, I want to hold it, I don't want to pay taxes on my Bitcoin, but I want some liquidity. I want to lock up my BTC. I'll actually have to first go through BitGo and WBTC and go to Ethereum. I'm taking the risk of a different network and then using applications on Ethereum to actually have that. And I think as builders in Bitcoin, we can actually remove a lot of that friction, a lot of that unnecessary risk. And by building these applications in a very native way with Bitcoin, if stablecoins were just issued on the L1, you can actually start seeing some of these trades happening directly on the L1. You're no longer moving your BTC to a Binance or some other exchange to be able to do that. I think those are like low-hanging fruit type of things that are very, very obvious that we should just be doing. And it's very surprising that it has taken the developer community in Bitcoin a very, very long time to come around to it. But I think it's happening. Like now, finally, there are so many different solutions that are being tried that I think some of them are just going to stick and actually work out.
And was that one of your goals, Casey? When you were working on these native apps that could actually be developed straight on the top of Bitcoin?
Yeah, no, I mean, my goal was, I think there's another killer app, right? Which is this gambling collectible, like whatever. But yeah, certainly as a sort of tertiary goal, like I was building these things for the immediate use case, which is sort of degeneracy. I would, however, be very happy if they wound up being used for something useful. I don't know if that's going to happen, but so it is.
And so looking ahead at some of the other use cases, how, for example, might we see Bitcoin interacting with artificial intelligence in the future? Can we maybe talk a bit about that? And I'd like to direct that one to Nicolas.
Yeah, one maybe less talked about application of AI and Bitcoin is how can we leverage AI to help optimizing the network for money movement or payment transaction. A real use case that we have, which is not super sexy, but we find it pretty powerful, is how do we optimize the node management network and the rebalancing and the complexity of running transactions on the node Lightning Layer 2 network using AI, optimizing that right, finding the best right funder to optimize successful rates on payments. That's one behind the scene type application of AI, but we see more and more real optimization of the infrastructure behind Bitcoin, leveraging AI capabilities these days.
And we also spoke a little bit, we were talking about restaking as well. What are some of the other, we just have about 10 minutes left. I want to look at maybe some of the other exciting future use cases of Bitcoin. Maybe we could talk a little bit.
I can talk a little bit about the AI stuff, right? So I have no strong opinions on what type of applications with AI would take off, what wouldn't. But what I do know as a developer is Bitcoin script is a very low level language that a lot of developers out in the world would want to program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's something we know. If you look at the number of Solidity developers, or recently the Rust developers who are building on Solana, I think there's a reason that developers are attracted to those types of programming languages. And I believe that it's very important that we are able to move BTC into these types of fully expressive programming environments to be able to then build these applications, like AI use cases or whatever. For me, it's very hard to imagine that Bitcoin script would be the thing that takes off in a massive way, but tens of thousands of developers are actually doing that. And that's where my work comes in, right? Like we are working on, call them L2s, call them layers, whatever definition you want to use, but it's effectively taking BTC into a more programmable environment where it's cheaper, faster, easier to sort of like program Bitcoin and move it around, and then trying to use Bitcoin security as much as possible, right? And then I think there are so many different types of these L2s that are coming up. And again, what I'm excited about is let the experimentation happen. People are going to throw different things at the wall and then see what actually sticks. But I think something is going to work here. We have seen this from the Ethereum landscape. They're like, $80 billion worth of like L2s, which are different in different ways. And there are tons of developers who are going there and actually building interesting stuff. And that's the thing I think that needs to happen on Bitcoin for any of these use cases or applications, a new thing that we aren't even thinking about right now to take off.
Yeah. And then what other ways do you think that the Bitcoin's functionality will continue to evolve? I mean, I know a decade is a very long time in crypto, but looking ahead, how do you think this functionality is going to continue to evolve, Jeff?
Well, one of the analogies I like to deploy in hotels is think of a champagne waterfall like you see in receptions or weddings or something like that. Is fundamentally Bitcoin, the L1, is the champagne glass at the very top. And as you're pouring in transactions and clearing them, eventually you hit a point where network fees start going up and you're contending for limited block space. Fundamentally, a Bitcoin fee is an auction bid in a block space auction. And so that's why with that waterfall analogy, you're seeing a lot of L2s and L3s and periphery networks is that, two reasons. Just one, it's more programmable and like as Muneeb was describing, that's what we do at Hemi as well, as we took an EVM and we added Bitcoin capability to it such that when you're in the EVM programming the more expressive smart contract, you can trigger a Bitcoin transaction on the main chain. You can process incoming Bitcoin payments. And that technology, Muneeb's technology at Stacks, is expanding Bitcoin's utility from these peripheral L2 networks. So it's making Bitcoin, the L1, more useful because you're expanding that ring of layer twos and similar technologies, rollups, ZKs, in that perspective. And that is what widens the use cases. And that is what speaks to the future of Bitcoin. I wrote in 2015, way back when, about Bitcoin's evolution towards a settlement style network where there's more Lightning transactions or roll-ups or L2 aggregations versus person-to-person, peer-to-peer Bitcoin transactions. And that's macroeconomically, that's the direction of the L1 network, and that's how the block space auction works. And so the future of Bitcoin, I think, is in everyone building around the L1 that enhances the L1 itself, the tippy top champagne glass and the champagne waterfall.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
One quick thing I would add to that is the reason why we are calling it Bitcoin Renaissance is all these ideas are old, right? Like the liquid network, the paper came out in like 2014. And this was all about like a way to scale Bitcoin and do fast payments between exchanges and other partners. Counterparty started NFTs on Bitcoin. Like Nick was talking about OmniLayer, where Tether actually started. So in some ways, like Bitcoin lost traction for users and developers and new applications to other networks, saw a ton of experimentation happen elsewhere. And now this is a renaissance because now some of the ideas that have been proven are coming back to Bitcoin in different ways. And that's, I think, is a very, very exciting thing.
Mm. And so I guess two pieces on that, and anyone can take these questions. Why do you think it did, why did these things not come to fruition in 2015? And then what do you think it is about this? Because not every renaissance goes to the end. What do you think it would be about this renaissance that would either make it have longevity or not?
I have an answer to that. I'll try to be brief. I think basically the 2017 civil war of Bitcoin has a lot to do with it. So I was on the small block side, which ended up winning. But I do think that after 2017, the Bitcoin community became very closed off to development and changes. Like they have like battle scars from that sort of like civil war. And at the same time, Ethereum was taking off and was very welcoming to developers and experimentation. And I think attempts to change Bitcoin have always been they fork the network, right? Like Bcash forked the network and the currency. I think the recent renaissance is people are not forking BTC, right? They're just trying to fork the culture. And they're saying, we will build on the same chain. You can't stop us from doing it, right? But we are changing the culture. We're bringing the developer culture back. And I think that type of movement is much more sustainable because otherwise, like imagine all these builders were trying to create a different Bitcoin. That's not going to go anywhere. And I think that was the mistake from like 2017. And
return of the Bitcoin pragmatist versus the maximalist.
Yeah, I mean, you know this very well. I mean, I think there was a period of ideological torpor in Bitcoin from around 2017 to 22, 5 years in the wilderness. And it took the real success, I would argue, of Ethereum, the success of their scaling roadmap, which is the roll-up centric approach, to demonstrate to us that there are other methods. And, you know, with all due respect to Lightning, you know, I feel like there was maybe an, overly maniacal focus on Lightning in the Bitcoin developer community and a rejection of alternative scaling methods. We just didn't contemplate them. But if you remember back to the early days of Bitcoin, we always said, okay, well, we'll take the best technologies from elsewhere and we'll just integrate them into Bitcoin. That didn't happen. It's time that happens. The Ethereum folks, to their credit, did perfect or really improve the notion of a roll-up. And, you know, so that's why I'm so excited that we finally have the opportunity to bring it back to Bitcoin.
Yeah, it was the OG Bitcoin maxim of you invent something elsewhere, we'll bring it back to Bitcoin. And so maybe it just happened on a longer time scale.
Yeah, but it's good that they're learning from Ethereum and you still can have the core functionality and premise of Bitcoin being safe and secure, but then taking the learnings from other chains as well.
I'd also pull out another comment from Muneeb in that Bitcoin developer script, like Bitcoin itself, bomb-proof, super secure, but is difficult to build on. And so what some of the EVM stuff did was it was just flat out easier to build on an EVM or on Solana or something like that versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't have self-sovereign contract addresses that can self-actuate autonomously, whereas the EVMs do. And again, that attracts Bitcoin developers and other developers to these other networks. But staying with the theme of Bitcoin Renaissance, it's now coming back to Bitcoin. And that's the interesting thing that I think plays into the future of Bitcoin ultimately.
Excellent. And we have 2 minutes left, so I would just like 20 seconds from each of you as to when this audience is thinking about Bitcoin, future of digital gold, what is the most exciting thing that they should think about? Jeff, we'll start with you and work backwards.
I'm going to echo Nick here is L2, rollups, ZK. To me, that's that next layer of the champagne waterfall. Developers are coming back to Bitcoin. It's, the Bitcoin Renaissance. That's exciting.
Yeah, not to be too excessively technical, but I would look to see real fraud proofs on Bitcoin via BitVM v2, hopefully, and EVM compatible L2s.
And I would encourage everyone to, more than just thinking about the technology and Bitcoin and whatever protocol, L2s or whatever, thinking about the use case that we want to create to help, financial and money movements, for example, and payments, build that in more modern infrastructure. So thinking about the real use case we want to bring. And then I think there are smart developers and companies behind it that can make it happen now using Bitcoin or whatever other protocols.
Yeah, I would just like pop up a level and remind everyone that Bitcoin is like north of like $1 trillion of capital, mostly passive. Not much of it is deployed, but it's also like insane amount of hash power, compute power that is not being used or reused to secure other networks or even like restake. And I think that's the big opportunity. So Stacks is doing is in one way. There are other projects that are also tapping into this massive resource, like insane amount of capital, insane amount of hash power. And I think I would like to see more developers kind of like come in and use that.
I think in the short term, just watch the degens, right? That's what people want. That's a real short-term path to success.
Excellent closing words. Well, Jeff, Nick, Muneeb, Casey, it's been a pleasure. Please join me in thanking my panel.